I will be talking about something that I am passionate about, which is how incentives can be used to harness the power of social norms to change people's behavior. This is some work that I've done with my collaborators, Ali Lieberman and Onamir from UC San Diego. So I'm going to flip the script and start with my punchline, which is that surcharges can substantially change people's behavior by signaling social norms. And so if you have one takeaway from this talk, I want it to be that surcharges are very powerful. But I'm going to dive into what I mean by behavior change and social norms. So if we were in person, I would ask you all to take a moment to think about if you've ever been in a situation where you felt like you wanted to fit in. And I suspect that what might happen is that a few of you would start raising your hands, and then some of you would look around the room to see what other people are doing and sort of follow their behavior and raise your hands as well. So if this happened, you would be conforming about saying that sometimes you want to conform with other people. And this is just sort of a natural fact of human behavior. So because we are such social beings, we often care about fitting in with our peers. This is really adaptive for us as a species. Because we care about fitting in many situations, we often pay attention to cues from others. So in particular, we pay attention to what other people seem to be doing and what other people seem to be approving and disapproving of. Now, of course, we are limited by our own perceptions and abilities. So really what we're influenced by is what we think other people are doing and what we think other people are approving and disapproving of. And these two perceptions are what are known as social norms. So this first one, this idea of what other people seem to be doing or what the typical behavior is, that's known as a descriptive norm. And then the second one, what we think other people seem to be approving and disapproving of, sort of what's the expected behavior, what's the right thing to do, that taps into what's known as injunctive norms. Now, because we care about fitting in with our peers, these social norms, both forms of norms, they can have a powerful impact on changing people's behavior. And in fact, in behavioral science research, there's been a lot of great work showing how you can use social norms to reduce littering, to reduce energy use, and to increase hotel towel reuse. So explicit messaging campaigns, because they have been so successful in the past, they are used often in campaigns designed to change people's behavior. So for example, you might see signs like this, where it says, binge drinking is not the norm. 8 out of 10 Siena students don't engage in high-risk drinking. Right? So this sort of campaign is explicitly telling you, here's what the norm is, with the idea that hopefully by conveying that norm, it will change your behavior as well, so you will not engage in binge drinking. This can be really powerful, but past research does show that these explicit messaging campaigns, they sometimes don't work. And one reason why they don't work is that they are advertising, right? If you see this sign, you're being explicitly told to do something in the form of an advertisement. And we know that sometimes people try to avoid ads, and sometimes they can even get irritated by ads. And so if you explicitly message people with social norm information, sometimes it works, sometimes it can backfire. And so what we wanted to do in our research was to think about if we can use small cues in the environment to subtly convey social norm information without explicitly telling people about that. So one thing that's increasingly common is the use of small incentives to change people's behavior. So for example, the University of Toronto actually offers a discount at their coffee shops for people who bring their own reusable mugs. So it's either 10 cents or 25 cents, depending on the location, these small incentives in the form of a discount to encourage environmental behavior. Now, at other times, these incentives are framed as surcharges, such as having to pay a 10-cent charge for not bringing a reusable grocery bag with you to the store. And so what we did in a series of experiments is we examined how people respond to these types of incentives, and in particular, what kind of information the incentives are subtly telling them. And so what we found over and over is that when people encounter a surcharge in the environment, they make an inference about social norms. So for example, if you go to a coffee shop and you see that they charge 10 cents extra for coffee cups if you don't bring your own reusable mug, then you might start thinking, geez, it seems like most people probably bring their own mugs here. It's kind of an expectation. This is something that people in this community think we really should all be doing. And so if I'm that guy who doesn't bring my own reusable mug, I might feel a little embarrassed and guilty for failing to conform to this perceived norm. And so when this happens, I probably will bring my own reusable mug, not necessarily because I care that much about saving 10 cents, but more so because I've learned from it that this is what people seem to do in this situation, and so I want to try to conform and fit in with my peers. And so in a series of experiments, we test this across all sorts of behaviors. So some of them are environmental ones, like bringing reusable mugs to a coffee shop or reusable bags to a grocery store. We also find this with how people dress, which is, of course, something we often think about as a social norm, like weddings. We even find this in a scenario actually with a Thanksgiving-themed 5K run, with incentives encouraging people to dress up like a turkey. And this is something that is clearly not a typical norm, but we find that when you use these small surcharges, people learn that it actually is a norm to dress like a turkey, and so they want to conform as well. But what's key is across all of these different settings, regardless of what the behavior seemed to be, when the people saw a surcharge, they inferred that it was the norm to conform. Norms have this big effect on our behavior, which is great, but what's even more powerful about social norms is that they can have rippling effects. So for example, if I go to a coffee shop and I learn that it's the norm that I should really be bringing my own reusable mug, then I might carry that normative inference around with me. And when I visit another coffee shop in the community, I might also spontaneously bring my reusable mug with me, even if that second location has no incentive, because I've learned that in this community, this is the normative behavior. And so in other words, what this suggests is that a single small incentive at one point in time can have these rippling effects, changing people's behavior even in other places and in other moments in time. So just to illustrate this, I'll walk you through an experiment that my colleagues and I ran. So this was actually during a normal flu season, but it will seem really on the nose right now during a global pandemic. We actually wanted to see if we could encourage undergrads to use hand sanitizer. So because it was flu season, we said it's good for you to clean your hands before you touch these common surfaces, right? So we're trying to encourage them to engage in this habit of cleaning their hands. And the way we did that is through these really small incentives. So when participants came into the lab, we offered them a chance to purchase extra spearmint gum at a discounted price. This is a very popular gum for undergrads in California, and so they were very excited about this deal. And we also said that if you're going to purchase this gum, there will be an incentive placed on you using this hand sanitizer here. And in particular, we either told them that you'll get a 5-cent discount if you do use the hand sanitizer, or that you'll have to pay a 5-cent surcharge if you don't use the hand sanitizer, right? We're trying to keep people safe and keep everything clean. And so at this moment in time, at the very beginning, they decided whether they wanted to buy gum, and they either did or didn't use that hand sanitizer. Then they went into the main lab and did an extended set of lab experiments. So they filled out surveys and they entered different situations. They experienced different emotions. They went through the process of a bunch of different studies. And then at the very end of the experiment, they checked out with the research assistants who told them that there were a few cookies left over from a previous experiment. And if you'd like, on your way out, feel free to grab a cookie over by the door. And so the cookies were placed on a table. And turns out we also placed a small hand sanitizer on that table. So at this point in time, we did not mention the hand sanitizer. We did not draw their attention to it at all. It just happened to be placed in the environment. And we predicted that the people who had seen that surcharge much earlier at the very beginning of the lab session, they might learn that it's sort of a social expectation for them to use sanitizer. And so as a consequence, they might spontaneously use it on their way out of the lab, even though there was no incentive in place and it wasn't mentioned. And sure enough, that's exactly what we found. So the people who had seen a surcharge at the very beginning, they're about twice as likely to spontaneously use that hand sanitizer at the end of the experiment when there's no incentive in place, compared to the people who had seen that same 5-cent discount. So this is interesting, but we also wanted to dig into the people who did not purchase. So remember, this incentive was imposed on purchasing the extra spearmint gum. And although it was very popular, not everybody actually bought the gum. So classic incentive theories would suggest that this incentive shouldn't affect those people, right? Because they didn't purchase, and so they didn't financially experience the incentive at all. But we predicted that because just hearing about a surcharge could teach them about these social norms, they might still conform to that behavior despite not ever experiencing this incentive firsthand. And indeed, that's what we found. So that people who had simply heard about a surcharge, they did not financially experience it at all, they were over twice as likely to spontaneously use that hand sanitizer at a second point in time as compared to the people who saw the discount. So overall, I have a few key takeaways to share with you. So the first is that surcharges can be harnessed to change people's behavior by signaling social norms. And this can lead to carryover effects, like with the hand sanitizer. If you learn about a surcharge in one place and time, this can change your behavior at other moments in time, even when the behavior is no longer incentivized. And it also suggests that our incentives that we put in place, they may be influencing a larger audience than we think. So with that hand sanitizer surcharge, it was 5 cents, right? How many of you would really truly care about saving or losing 5 cents? But how many of you would care about doing the right thing like everyone else and using hand sanitizer? So this suggests just this power of surcharges to change people's behavior. Thank you.